Hello, class. My name is Cruz, and today, myself and fellow group members will be presenting on the book Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, a guide and map for recovering from childhood trauma by Pete Walker.
Hi, my name is Miranda from Londe, and I will be discussing the main points that we will be going over from our book. Our first main point is that acknowledging the developmental arrests that pertain to your situation are vital to a successful recovery. We derive this main point from chapter 2, which talks about the different developmental arrests and where they may come from. Our second main point is the 4 Fs heavily influence CPTSD. At this point, we will be looking mostly at chapter 1, where the 4 Fs are discussed and explained. Our third main point is that reparenting grows self-compassion and self-protection, and we'll be focusing mostly on chapter 3 for this one that discusses reparenting and the implications of that. And our fourth main point is that emotional neglect is caused from CPTSD, which comes from chapter 5, but also just a general overview of the book, talking about emotional neglect and CPTSD and how they are connected. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ciarra Gaston.
Hi, everyone. I'm Breanna Miller, and we are doing main point 1.
The first major point that we have with our book is pertaining to recovery and how to successfully recover. The first quarter of the book focused a lot on recovery, so we wanted to make sure that we talked about that. Our main point reads, acknowledging the developmental arrests that pertain to your situation are vital to a successful recovery. Chapter 2 of the Complex PTSD talks heavily about the various levels of recovery, and we decided that one of the most important aspects of recovery are the developmental arrests that come with the healing process.
And so developmental arrests are described in complex PTSD. They are potential action items that may occur or not occur within health recovery. When there's a lack of developmental arrests, it is often a much harder outcome for those in the recovery process. And some of the most common developmental arrests are self-acceptance, clear sense of identity, self-compassion, self-protection, capacity to draw comfort from relationships, ability to relax, capacity for full self-expression, willpower and motivation, self-care, peace of mind, belief that life is a gift, and self-esteem, as well as self-confidence.
So with these developmental arrests, it is important to note that many different factors affect these within your recovery, such as your childhood abuse, neglect pattern, your innate nature, and any recovery that you have already accomplished. If there are errors within these areas of your recovery, you will weed out different arrests that you will unconsciously select for your own recovery. Some examples that we came up with that we think could not help fellow peers and those struggling with CPTSD are the most common forms of developmental recovery arrest, which include self-compassion, the ability to relax, and self-care.
And so for the first example we have regarding self-compassion, it entails being warm and understanding towards ourselves when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate, rather than ignoring our pain or flagellating ourselves with self-criticism. Our example reads to stop punishing ourselves for making mistakes. And with recovery, this is vital to understand that things happen and we cannot beat ourselves up for it continuously.
So the second example that we wanted to share was regarding the developmental arrest of having the ability to relax, which is pretty self-explanatory in its own definition. But for our example, we related it to having the ability to stop continuously stressing over small things and to take time for yourself, take a nap, go out to eat, hang out with friends or family. And if this is implemented into your day-to-day recovery, you will heal successfully.
And so for our last example, would be self-care, which is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during these periods of stress. And so our example says to keep up with personal hygiene, to go shopping, to do a skincare routine, or even working out. And doing these things not only help you with recovery, but they keep you mentally sharp and physically healthy during this hard time of your life. And so that's our main point 1. Thanks for listening.
Hi, my name is Hayley Houck, and I will be discussing main point 2. which is the 4Fs, heavily influence complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, if you are new to the psychology world or perhaps haven't read the book or things like that, you probably don't even know what the 4Fs are. So I'm going to go over that. The 4Fs are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And it's important to know which one you are, because it can help us understand your coping mechanisms and reactions in relation to your complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The first F is fight, which can be defined as a person using force to defend themselves. The second F is flight, which can be defined as the person using escape or fleeing as a way to keep themselves safe. The third F is freeze, which can be defined as the person shutting down physically, emotionally, or both in the midst of danger. And finally, our last F is fawn, which can be defined as the person molding to their abuser's needs in order to survive. Next, I'll go ahead and pass it on to Ariana for some examples. Thank you.
Now I'm going to be discussing the examples provided for main point 2. And as we just mentioned, the 4 Fs are known as fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Now, a perfectly healthy way to use the fight response is that it could be used to set assertiveness and boundaries in your environment. Now, this response could help limit areas and subjects that could be triggering to you or others. Flight. Flight could be used when it is evident that further engaging with an individual or a situation will only worsen the circumstance. Freeze. Freeze is an appropriate time to use when one is assessing a stressful situation. You take a brief moment to decide which of the 4 Fs is best to use or to continue to use. Naturally you freeze, and you take a brief second to decide whether you're going to fight, flight, freeze, or maybe even use fawn. Now, fawn can be used to help others, whether you're compromising, listening, or making peace. Remember, you're diffusing stress, you're not exasperating it. Thank you.
Okay. Hi there, my name is Jason Diez. Today I'll be presenting main point 3, reparenting grows self-compassion and self-reflection. Here is the main points of what the reparenting grows self-compassion and self-protection is. Reparenting is a deep-rooted relational healing that affirms one's self-compassion and self-protection. For example, self-mothering is based on the perception that the unconditional love is every child's birthright. Same thing as well as self-fathering. It represents the self-protection, creating a foundation to always fall back onto. Some examples that could follow under as self-mothering or self-parenting or self-fathering could also be, in order to self-mother yourself, you have to accept your mental, physical, and emotional aspect of yourself. Remember that in order to thrive, you have to create a safe space for yourself to fall back to. So that represents your mental state, your physical state, and emotional state as well. So another one as well for the self-fathering for yourself is to manage your stress by creating a scenario that combats the experience. Imagine your stress as something that is fearful, shameful, or even embarrassing that can bring you back to ground zero. Think of self-fathering as a way to remind yourself that things happened and what can you do to immerse yourself into a newer experience. Reparenting allows people to provide a balance within themselves, surrounding yourself in a support group that brings you both the self-compassion and self-protection, better known as the Reparenting Committee. So this support group could be either your peers, your friends, your loved ones, or even family members. The Reparenting Committee is basically just a group of individuals or people that help you in the terms of growing your self-compassion and self-protection for yourself.
Hello, my name is Brenden. For the third main point, we will be discussing reparenting and how it restores self-compassion and self-protection. Reparenting is a key step to relational healing. It is a primary process used to answer the many needs seen within traumatized children, with the two most fundamentals needed involving love and protection. These two needs can be met from reparenting if the individual does two things: self-fathering and self-mothering. Typically, when a child's mothering needs are met, self-compassion is installed into the child. The same can be applied when the child's fathering needs are met, with that providing protection to the child. Self-fathering helps restores the needs of protection when it cannot be provided, while self-mothering also does the same in restoring the needs of love or self-compassion to the child. Self-compassion is seen as the home of recovery and self-protection as its foundation. When self-compassion is fully sufficed, it provides a quote-unquote home base for the individual to fall back on during difficult times. An urge to be self-protective arises from it as well. The advancement towards recovery process is immeasurable when we commit to self-mothering and self-fathering.
What's going on, y'all? I'm Joshua Lee here, and from group 5 for our book presentation. And today the book I'm gonna be discussing about, for my main point, is about complex PTSD. So from surviving to thriving, a guide and map for recovering from childhood trauma. And so my main point that I wanted to talk about today, that I thought was very interesting, was emotional neglect. So from reading this book and what I've heard, all the things that was being said from the book, I found that I just pointed out a few things that I thought, that stuck with me. So for CPTSD, one of the things that I know is that it is caused from emotional. One of the things from CPTSD is emotional neglect, which typically underlies most traumatizations that are not nearly noticeable, because in my opinion, with some children you wouldn't really know, which is why many children aren't really fond of expressing how they feel towards their parents. But another thing that I noticed, another thing that I want to point out is another part that plays into that would be the parents as well, because because parents that who routinely ignore their child or children, that could also cause a problem, because children that children that are feeling abandoned and also depressed or anything like that, it can also cause fear in a child, which then eventually the child tends to give up. Like I said, becomes depressed, and then dealing with death-like feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. These constant rejections only make a child feel like he or she is not important, or feels like that they're not loved, which in this case is worse than anything for a child. And then some of the things that I wanted to point out, that children, when it comes to emotional neglect, these are the things that children start to go through, which is like, and it's these three main things would be depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. And so one of the ways that I think, well, as far as treatment wise, when it comes to things, a thing I wanted to point out is effective work on the wounds. Verbal and emotional abuse can sometimes open the door to minimizing the awful impact of emotional neglect. So things like things that parents can do, or the child or themselves, the person can do themselves. I would say either pay attention to your feelings, accept that you blocked off your feelings, but know that they're still waiting on you. And then I would say another thing is share your story with someone. You know, talk to someone and let them know that, you know, that it's okay, that whatever you're going through, just speak out. And yeah, that's my piece.
Hello, my name is Brittney Nelson. I am responsible for doing the reviews, the overall reviews of Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, a guide and map for recovering childhood trauma. Our scores range from a low of 75 to a high of 95. That gave us an average score from all 13 separate reviews that resulted in 83, which is overall a pretty positive review of the text.
Hi, my name is Omar Portillo. Here are the likes for the book Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. It has useful advice. It is well organized. It has relevant studies. It is a good readability. And it has real-world examples or scenarios used.
Hi, my name is Ellen. One of our group's dislikes was that the book had chapters with multiple subchapters. There was a lot of information in each chapter, and we felt this was a bit overwhelming and could create confusion for some readers. Another one of our dislikes was that multiple times in the beginning of the book, the author referenced information that was in later chapters of the book. This required back and forth reading, which was a bit aggravating.
Hi again, it's Miranda Londe, and I'll be discussing our recommendations for this book. Generally, we recommend this book for people who struggle with or think they might struggle with CPTSD. We also recommend it to family members and friends of those who have CPTSD to help better understand them and to support them in what they're going through. We also recommend this book to people who work with or are studying to work with children, especially children that may be affected by CPTSD. And we highly recommend this book because it's a very easy read. It's got a lot of useful advice, and we think that it would work well for anybody who has any connection to someone with CPTSD. And lastly, I'm just going to throw up our references page, which has our APA citing for Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, a guide and map for recovering from childhood trauma. Thank you.